morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all our Sip and Talkers out there, wherever you are. Welcome back to Sip and Talk.
Welcome, welcome.
You know, I've been seeing something really interesting online lately, just a massive debate.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it's this idea that China's self-driving tech is already brown.
Miles ahead. I've seen those exact words. The ads are incredible, right? So slick, they make it feel like level 4, level 5. It's just normal over there.
Totally. It looks amazing. But then on the flip side, you scroll a little further and you see these crash videos. And honestly, some of them are just terrifying.
And that's the contradiction, isn't it? The ads are always beautiful.
Of course.
But as a researcher, my brain hears miles ahead, and this little fact check alarm starts going off. Especially when you see the data, the sheer number of accidents involving these so-called advanced systems in China. You really have to zoom in and ask, what is the actual cost of all this speed?
Right. So that's what we're going to get into today. We want to break down why these self-driving cars in China seem to be crashing so often. How are Europe and the U.S. managing to avoid some of these pitfalls?
And we have to tackle that really sharp criticism, the one that says Chinese self-driving is on the road because Chinese drivers are just braver.
Is that sarcasm, or is there a kernel of truth in there? I mean, sometimes in China, it feels like criticizing a domestic new energy vehicle is more dangerous than criticizing a politician.
It's that. And let's call it a unique market protection mechanism. So we're going to start with the latest accidents, lay out the data, and see if it's about bravery or if it's really about regulation. We're going to explore the price of a system that seems to prioritize development speed over, well, transparency. What happens when the consumer can't really criticize, or when the truth about an accident gets buried under legal threats?
So grab your coffee, because this one might get a little heated.
Today, we're asking, China's self-driving boom, tech leadership or sheer bravery?
Let's jump right in. Okay, so let's start right where it matters most, on the road, with the real-world consequences. When we talk about these high-profile, often fatal incidents, we need to be super clear about the technology we're discussing, because most of the time we're talking about level 2 systems.
Yes, that is such a critical clarification. It's so important. The headlines, the deaths, they are not, for the most part, coming from those fully autonomous, geofenced level 4 robo-taxis like a Waymo or even Baidu's Apollo Go.
No.
They're coming from level 2 advanced driver assistance systems, or ADS, the kind that are sold to you and me in mass market cars.
And L2 is this huge gray area, technically and legally. I mean, these systems have all these fancy names, NOA, Navigation on Autopilot, or NGP, Navigation Guided Pilot. But at the end of the day, the global definition of L2 requires one thing.
The driver.
The driver. You have to be watching the road at all times, ready to grab the wheel instantly. It's a support system, not a replacement for you.
But that's not how it's sold, is it? The marketing is so aggressive. They use these grand terms like smart driving or automatic pilot, implying it's fully autonomous. It creates this huge gap between the promise and the reality of the tech.
And that gap, that's where the tragedies happen, is this misclassification problem.
And the most devastating recent example, the one that really forced regulators to act, was the Xiaomi SU7 tragedy back in March of 2025.
This one was just awful. It brought the human cost of this race for L2 dominance into incredibly painful focus.
The details are harrowing. It was on an expressway in Anhui province. The car was a brand new, highly anticipated Xiaomi SU7 running on its level 2 ADS function at highway speeds.
So on NOA.
Exactly. And was approaching a construction zone, which is probably the single toughest edge case for any L2 system because it's a temporary change the car's map doesn't know about.
And this wasn't just like a confusing lane line. What did the system actually fail to see?
It failed to identify a massive static object. A construction barricade, a big cement post, was blocking its path because the lane was closed. The system just didn't react. It didn't brake, it didn't swerve, and it didn't give the driver a clear warning in time.
How fast was it going?
The telemetry data showed it was doing about 116 kilometers per hour just before the crash. At the moment of impact, it was still going 97.
Hitting a concrete post at almost 100 kilometers an hour? That's like hitting a solid wall. The energy involved is immense. I'm guessing the battery?
The battery pack breached, and the car caught fire almost instantly.
Oh, man.
And 3 young women died.
They were unable to get out of the burning car. This wasn't just some tech glitch. It was a national shockwave because the brand is so huge and the outcome was so horrific.
And the government's reaction was, it had to be swift and massive. It confirmed this wasn't just a one-off driver error.
Absolutely. The Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, the MIIT, jumped on it. By September 2025, Xiaomi was forced to issue a huge recall, something like 116,900 of their SU7 standard models. And the reason for the recall?
It was explicitly tied to the L280S function. The official statement said its operation significantly increased the risk of a collision. That's the government saying, point blank, that a mass-market feature was rolled out without being properly safety tested.
The SU7 crash was the tipping point, but this pattern had been building for a while, hadn't it? This specific problem, the system's inability to see stationary objects at high speed, it keeps popping up.
It's the recurring nightmare for these systems. Look at the Huawei AITO M7 crashes in 2024 and 2025. There was one fatal rear-end collision, car doing 115 kilometers per hour, and its automatic emergency braking, the AEB, it just never triggered. It slammed right into the back of a truck.
So the system basically saw a giant truck and classified it as what, part of the scenery?
Essentially, yeah. It's a sensor fusion problem. The system might think it's an overhead sign or just background noise. It's a known flaw in L2 systems everywhere. But in China's high-speed, high-stakes environment, it's proving deadly.
And with the AITO M7 case, there was another layer of controversy, wasn't there? Something about the doors.
Yes. Reports after the crash suggested the electronic door locks failed. So even if someone had survived the initial impact, rescuers couldn't get to them. You have the primary failure of the AEB, compounded by a secondary safety failure. It just amplified the public anger.
Then you have another big player, XPeng, with a similar incident.
Same story. A 2025 crash with their P7 model. Their advanced XNGP system rear-ended another stationary vehicle. It's the same failure signature over and over.
So why does this keep happening? You mentioned sensor fusion.
Right. So radar is great for detecting speed, but bad at telling you what something is. Cameras are great at identifying objects, but can struggle in bad light or at high speeds. So the car tries to fuse that data. But if the HD map is wrong, and the camera misinterprets a parked truck as, say, a shadow, the software often trusts the camera's bad classification over the radar's correct detection, and boom, collision.
So if the individual accidents aren't convincing enough, there was this big simulation test that really exposed the scale of the problem.
Oh, this was a shocker. It was a third-party test, really rigorous. They took 36 different cars from all the major brands and put them through 15 really tough scenarios, complex intersections, night driving, emergency maneuvers.
And the results were not good.
Not good is an understatement. It was a data shock. The overall failure rate was 64.26%.
Wait. 64%? So only a third of the maneuvers were handled safely?
Exactly. And that failure rate led to 216 simulated accidents during the test. 216. If you think of those tests as representing real-world edge cases, which they do, it tells you these systems are being put on the road when they're fundamentally not ready for complex situations.
That's the proof right there. The systems are just not ready for prime time when things get messy.
And this mountain of evidence, from the fatal crashes to this simulation data, is what directly led to that big regulatory change in 2025.
The one banning the marketing terms.
Yep. The government stepped in and banned companies from using misleading phrases like smart driving or autonomous driving in their ads.
So they're basically trying to force the marketing to match the reality of the technology because it was clear consumers were being led to believe they could just check out.
The government is playing catch up. Along with the marketing ban, they released these ethical guidelines for autonomous driving in July 2025. Which started to try and figure out who's responsible in a crash, the driver or the system. But again, these are all reactive measures put in place after the death toll made it impossible to ignore.
Okay, so we've got technically immature systems and misleading marketing. But the question remains, why is this happening so much faster and so much more severely in China than anywhere else? Let's get into the root causes, starting with the market itself. It feels like a total pressure cooker.
It is a perfect storm. It's driven by what they call internal involution. It's this incredibly fierce, cutthroat internal competition. It forces manufacturers to rush out these high-level ADS features, not because they're fully baked, but because they absolutely have to get an edge on their domestic rivals.
So they're choosing features and speed over the long, slow, frankly boring process of safety validation that might take years.
It's a deliberate business choice. We can actually put a number on it. The average refresh cycle for a Chinese EV model, the time from its launch to a major update, is just 1.3 years.
1.3 years.
Now compare that to a legacy foreign brand in the US or Europe. Their average cycle is 4.2 years.
Wow, that's a 3-year difference. That's 3 years of safety checks, of gathering real-world mileage just
Yeah.
Gone.
Right.
Sacrifice for speed.
And think about what that does to an engineering team. Instead of running millions of miles in simulations to find those rare, dangerous edge cases, they're essentially using their customers to find them. The business decision is to launch now and fix it later with an over-the-air update. The customer becomes the beta tester.
And they're pouring insane amounts of money into this. I saw that companies like NIO and XPeng have an R&D intensity of around 21% of their revenue. That's huge.
It's a number you'd expect a seed from, like a high-end pharmaceutical company, not a car maker. It confirms that the whole business model is built around this relentless pace of innovation. But that pace just doesn't leave room for methodical safety engineering.
Okay, so you have this breakneck development speed. Now let's layer on top of that the driving environment itself. Chinese roads are uniquely challenging. We call it the China edge case.
It is the world's toughest driving test, no question. You have incredibly dense traffic, but the real complexity is the mix. You've got cars, sure, but they're sharing the road with a swarm of electric bikes, scooters, pedestrians, and they're all moving unpredictably.
So the car's AI isn't just predicting what another car will do. It has to predict a scooter weaving through traffic or a person stepping off a curb while looking at their phone.
Exactly. And the infrastructure is inconsistent. Lane markings can be faded. There's construction everywhere that's not on any map. It's this unstructured chaos on top of a structured road system. It pushes the AI sensors and algorithms to their absolute limit. It's a whole different world from, say, the neat grid of suburban Phoenix where Waymo does a lot of testing.
And that messy environment directly relates to the tech choices they've made, right? Specifically, this heavy reliance on HD maps.
Yes, HD maps are the cornerstone of their L2 and L3 strategy. In a perfectly mapped area, they're brilliant. They give the car centimeter-level precision.
But the downside is, if you rely on that perfect map too much, the system just falls off a cliff when the real world doesn't match.
That's the fatal flaw. The system is designed to match what its sensors see to a perfect digital twin of the road. But when a temporary construction site pops up, like in the SU-7 crash, the map is suddenly wrong. The system loses its ground truth and has no idea what to do.
Then you add the human factor back in, this L2 user problem. The marketing convinces people the car is smarter than it is, so they start to trust it too much.
It's basic psychology. You hear automatic pilot, you start to disengage. You check your phone, you relax. But when the system hits one of those edge cases where it's weakest, it throws up a takeover now warning. But the driver has already checked out mentally.
And that critical 2-second human reaction time is gone.
It's gone. And if the car is already failing to see a static object at high speed, a 1-second delay is the difference between a close call and a fatal crash.
And all of this was happening in what was basically a regulatory vacuum for years.
A total institutional vacuum. The rules were inconsistent, and the legal framework just wasn't built to handle this flood of consumer-grade semi-autonomous systems. The regulators have been playing a reactive game of catch-up ever since.
So let's pull the lens back even further and look at the bigger picture. There's this fundamental, almost philosophical split between how China and the West are approaching this. I like to think of it this way. China is building a high-speed train system where everything is coordinated by the infrastructure. The West is trying to build the perfect all-terrain Jeep that can handle any environment all on its own.
That is a perfect analogy. It captures the strategic difference completely. China's entire play is built on what they call Vehicle Road Cloud Integration, or VRC. This isn't just a corporate strategy, it's a national industrial mandate.
Okay, break down VRC for us. What does that actually mean?
It means the car isn't smart on its own. It's smart because it's constantly talking to the road in the cloud. It relies on a technology called CV2X, or cellular V2X, which leverages China's massive 5G network.
So the road itself becomes part of the car's brain.
Exactly. They're embedding intelligence into the infrastructure. Roadside units with their own cameras, LiDAR, and radar are constantly scanning the environment. They see a traffic jam ahead, or a patch of ice, or a pedestrian about to jaywalk, and they beam that information directly to the car using 5G.
So the car can see around corners, basically?
Yeah.
Its awareness extends way beyond its own sensors?
Precisely. And the scale of this is staggering. We're talking pilot projects in around 20 major cities, over 35,000 kilometers of VRC-enabled roads, with something like 11,000 of these smart roadside units already installed. This is a core part of their next 5-year plan. It's a huge national project.
It definitely sounds like it could scale faster, but it also creates a single point of failure, right? If the network goes down, what happens?
That's the risk. Now, let's contrast that with the Western model, which is all about caution, transparency, and the big one, liability.
Financial liability. The fear of being sued into oblivion.
That's the engine of the Western approach. Companies like Waymo are obsessed with achieving what they call extreme safety redundancy. Their level 4 systems have to be able to handle any situation on their own, with zero help from the outside world. Their pace is painfully slow, but the engineering has to be bulletproof.
Because the legal system demands it.
That's the key difference. In the U.S., you have the NHTSA mandating collision reports, and you have incredibly strict civil liability laws. The cost of a single major failure is astronomical.
And the cruise incident in San Francisco in 2023 is the poster child for this.
Absolutely. One single horrible accident where a cruise AV dragged a pedestrian and regulators shut down their entire nationwide operation instantly. It caused them millions in fines, but more than that, it forced a complete top-to-bottom reset.
One incident and a global leader gets put on ice. That financial and regulatory hammer forces you to be slow and steady. You simply can't afford a public failure when bankruptcy is a real possibility.
And that demand for transparency shows up in the data too. In the US, if you're testing an AV in California, you have to publicly report every single time a human safety driver has to intervene. It's called a disengagement report.
And how does that compare to the reporting in China?
Well, there was some analysis that compared Baidu's fleet in California, under those strict rules, with its fleet back home in China. And the data strongly suggested that the actual rate of human interventions needed in China was much, much higher than what was being publicly reported.
So the regulators in China might be turning a blind eye to a higher failure rate to maintain the illusion of progress and speed.
It seems that way. That lack of mandated transparency is a key enabler of their velocity. If the West's safety culture is driven by a fear of lawsuits, China's speed is driven by a state mandate and a willingness to absorb failures quietly to keep moving forward.
Which brings us right back to that bravery argument. Let's just tackle it directly. This idea that China's self-driving cars are everywhere because Chinese people are braver.
Right. And we need to be clear, this isn't a compliment. It's a cynical observation about a systemic failure.
I completely agree. It's not about individual courage. It's about a concept called risk allocation.
Let's break that down. In the US and Europe, the massive cost of liability lawsuits, fines, shutdowns, forces the company to internalize the risk. They spend billions making sure the car is as safe as humanly possible before it hits the road.
In that model, the corporation bears the risk.
Exactly. The fear of financial ruin is the best safety feature ever invented.
But in China, that model is flipped on its head.
It's inverted. Because the national priority is technological supremacy and market share, and because the legal framework is still playing catch-up, companies can effectively externalize the risk. They push the final, most dangerous phase of testing onto the public.
So in that system, the consumer bears the risk.
100%. The consumer becomes the final, unpaid quality assurance tester for an L2 system that is still very much in development. When that Xiaomi SU7 hits a concrete barrier, the ultimate cost, the deaths and injuries, is borne by the victims. The company has a recall, sure, some bad press, but they don't face the kind of existential financial threat a U.S. company would.
And this whole risk transfer is made worse by the information gap. Like we said, consumers are being told they have an automatic pilot. They're not being brave. They're operating with incomplete and, frankly, dangerous information.
So let's just call it what it is. It's not that Chinese drivers are braver. It's that they have been structurally, and often without their knowledge, signed up to be the world's largest beta testing group for a technology that isn't ready.
And at the end of the day, the true measure of competitive advantage in this industry isn't speed. It's safety driven by a fear of lawsuits. That regulatory environment is what shapes the technology.
Which leads us to a much darker side of this whole story.
Information suppression. If the whole system relies on maintaining this narrative of miles ahead, what happens when a terrible crash like the SU7 incident threatens that story?
It often gets cleaned up. It disappears. There's a systematic effort to control the narrative, especially when it involves these huge domestic brands that are part of the Made in China 2025 national strategy. And the main tool they use is the legal system.
So if they weaponize the law, who are they targeting?
Critics, car owners who complain online, bloggers who post dash cam footage of accidents, media outlets that ask tough questions. The lawsuits are usually for defamation or harming commercial reputation, and they demand huge apologies and financial payments.
And unlike in the West, where it's really hard for a big company to win a defamation suit against a customer, the success rate there is different.
It's remarkably high. The courts often seem to side with the commercial interests of these strategic industries. Tesla really pioneered this tactic in China, and they've won case after case against their critics.
Is there an example that really illustrates the effect this has?
The best one is the car top protester from 2021. This woman, who claimed her car's brakes failed in a crash, got so frustrated she climbed on top of a Tesla at an auto show to protest.
I remember that. It went viral.
It did. And Tesla sued her for defamation. In 2024, the court sided with the company. They forced her to pay a massive fine, something like 170,000 RMB, and issue a public, humiliating apology.
Wow. That's a life-changing amount of money for a regular person. The message that sends is crystal clear. If you speak out, you risk financial ruin.
It creates a powerful chilling effect, a massive self-censorship environment. Why would you risk it? Especially when criticizing one of these national champion companies can be framed as creating instability, which is a much more serious charge than just a commercial dispute.
So it's not just about protecting a company, it's about protecting the national narrative.
And the state's power doesn't just stop with the courts. We've seen credible reports of videos of these major accidents like the SU-7 crash being scrubbed from social media by government order. They are actively limiting the kind of open public review of failures that you need to make the technology safer.
Which is the ultimate irony. The very act of suppressing criticism to protect the image of advancement is probably slowing down the actual process of making the technology safer and more trustworthy in the long run.
Exactly. Transparency is everything for trust in autonomous systems, and they're choosing silence.
And this isn't just a domestic Chinese issue. This is a global tech race, and it involved a deep strategic asymmetry when it comes to data.
This is where China has built a very clever strategic moat. Let's start with their defense, data localization. They have a law, the Automobile Data Security Regulation, that enforces strict data sovereignty.
What does that mean in plain English?
It means all the data collected by a car's sensors, the mapping data, the operational data, has to stay inside China. For a company to send that data outside the country, it has to pass a ridiculously strict security review. It effectively locks down their data and protects their intellectual property.
Okay, so that's the defense. What's the offense?
The offense is data exploitation. We see Chinese companies like Baidu and Pony.ai testing their AVs all over the U.S., especially in data-rich places like California. And U.S. lawmakers are getting very concerned about this.
What's the specific concern?
The concern is that all the valuable training data they're gathering from navigating complex American roads learning, from our driver behaviors, our road signs, our edge cases, is being beamed straight back to their R&D headquarters in China. No questions asked.
So China is locking its own data down while simultaneously hoovering up data from the West to train its own algorithms, potentially helping them leapfrog competitors who can't get that same level of access inside China.
That is the very definition of strategic asymmetry. And that data is the fuel for their whole leadership narrative.
Which brings us to the final and maybe most important takeaway for you, our listener, no matter where you are or what car you drive.
Consumer responsibility. Please, hear this. No matter what the marketing says, no matter how fast the technology seems to be moving, until we have certified level 4 or level 5 autonomy and a crystal clear legal framework for liability.
Which we do not have.
We do not. The driver is always 100% responsible.
You have to drive with the assumption that the system will fail you at the worst possible moment. Knowing the limits of your level 2 system is so much more important than having the latest, fanciest software.
And for anyone involved in an accident with one of these systems, especially in China, the legal ambiguity is a huge problem. It creates systemic risk for victims because until the liability is placed squarely on the manufacturer, the way massive U.S. fines do, the risk will always remain with the human behind the wheel.
So let's circle all the way back to where we started, that core tension. China's leadership in this space is real. You can't deny the scale, the investment, the ambition of their VRC model. This is not a paper tiger.
But, and it's a huge but, that leadership is built on a foundation of what we're calling regulatory bravery. It's a systemic choice driven by state ambition and market pressure to move the final, riskiest part of R&D onto public roads. The safety question isn't about national character. It's purely structural.
Here at Sip&Talk, we always try to give you an objective, clear-eyed look at the facts, no matter who's involved. It's all about critical thinking when you're looking at these huge, world-changing technologies.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought for you to chew on today. Looking ahead, which model will win out? Will the world adopt China's high-speed, coordinated VRC model that relies on smart infrastructure? Or will the safety-first, standalone vehicle approach of Waymo in the West prevail?
Yeah.
What is the right balance for regulators to strike between pushing technology forward and ensuring human safety?
A question that's going to define the next decade of how we all get around. Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation.
And on a much, much lighter note, if your brain feels like it's full of data and you need a serious change of pace, you have to go check out our friend Mickey's YouTube channel, Mickytolife.
Yes. If you want to see his latest travel vlogs from Europe or just his unique brand of Mickey-style humor, please go subscribe. Mickytolife. It will absolutely be a palate cleanser and give you a good laugh.
In the meantime, from both of us, thanks for tuning in to another Sip and Talk.
We'll catch you next time. Until then, stay curious.